Every moment in time holds power, some to build, others to break. But what if the hour you choose to refresh your body is the very moment unseen forces awaken to refresh their plans? Tonight we uncover what lies beyond the steam and silence when you shower in the wrong hour. You see, there is something unusual, something sacred about the midnight hour, not because of superstition, not because of folklore, but because this hour sits at the intersection of transition, the space where two realms meet, day and night, light and darkness, awareness and vulnerability. Most people are asleep, unaware, unguarded, but it is in this stillness, this calm, that movement begins. Not physical, but spiritual. While you rest, they rise. While you dream, they plan. And if you are unaware, you may step into that hour with open skin and a closed spirit in a place called your shower. Yes, something as routine as a shower at midnight becomes a stage. You believe you're washing away the dirt of the day, but what if something else is watching, waiting, when you're most relaxed? Alone, uncovered, this is the hour the wise don't take lightly. The hour when silence isn't empty, it's loud, with intent, activity, presence. Have you ever felt it? That sudden chill, though there's no draft, the moment the water runs hot, yet your skin runs cold, the way the air feels heavy, thick, as if the very atmosphere is watching you. That's not just your imagination, it's not just the hour, it's the access that hour gives. Between 12 and 3 a.m., many of the most strategic, dark, and manipulative rituals are performed, not by mistake, but by design. It is the window of warfare, and most don't even know the war has begun. You think you're just rinsing your body, but what if you're exposing your essence? What if, while you sing, they study? While you relax, they react? What if the water isn't the only thing running? In that moment, naked in more ways than one, you become visible to forces that do not need permission to observe, only an opportunity. And the steam, it doesn't hide you, it reveals you, because in the absence of sound and sight, the spiritual frequency is clearest. They don't need to knock, they're already in. This is why people wake from sleep with heaviness, with confusion, with questions they can't answer, because they didn't know the hour mattered. They didn't know that night has a rhythm, and those who know how to play it control what happens while you sleep. So the next time you consider stepping into that shower past midnight, ask yourself, who else knows your routine? Who else is waiting for that moment? The midnight hour is not just a time, it's a territory. But if that's true, then what makes the act itself so dangerous? Let's talk about why timing is more dangerous than the act itself. It's not always what you do that creates the consequence, but when you do. See, we've been trained to judge actions, to measure decisions by behavior. But timing is often ignored. And yet, timing is the hidden key that determines access, influence, and exposure. You can walk through a door at the wrong time, and the same door that was meant to bless you now breaks you. You can speak the right words in the wrong moment, and instead of building bridges, you create battles. The same applies when you bathe, when you shower, when you cleanse yourself. It may seem harmless, just water, just soap, just routine. But in the wrong hour, that simple act becomes a broadcast, a signal, a flare in the spiritual realm, because timing sends a message. At certain hours, environments are more spiritually active. Frequencies shift, energies awaken, territories become more sensitive, and you, unknowingly, step right into that space, unaware of the activity already in motion. The danger isn't in the water. It's not even in the act of cleaning. The danger lies in the moment, the invisible calendar, the ticking clock that divides the protected from the exposed. Some hours are guarded, others are gathered. You may not know this, but some of the most potent exchanges, covenants, and manipulations occur between one and not because people are active, but because spiritual permissions are heightened. There's less resistance, less noise, less protection from distraction. It's in this silent space that they move freely, and you, unclothed, unaware, become visible and vulnerable. What feels like peace might actually be a pause before pressure, What feels like quiet might be an invitation for observation. Ask yourself, why is it in certain hours your thoughts feel heavier? Why is it that some of your strangest dreams, darkest feelings, or unexplained fears show up after midnight? Why do accidents, disturbances, and mental unrest peak during these hours? Because timing isn't just a schedule, it's a strategy. They don't care what you're doing, they care when you're doing it. A shower at noon is a habit. A shower at 2 a.m. is a signal. A routine act during an irregular hour marks you, tracks you, tags you. That's why some people wake up more tired than when they went to sleep. That's why confusion starts to feel familiar. That's why the same dream keeps returning. You weren't attacked because of your actions. You were approached because of your timing. They move in windows. You live by clocks. But if you don't align your awareness, their window will become your doorway. So ask yourself, who is keeping time for you? But it gets deeper. If timing exposes you, then what happens when the spirits don't rest? But wait, let's look at why the spirit realm doesn't sleep. The spirit realm doesn't operate by the rules of rest. It doesn't clock out, it doesn't sleep, it doesn't wait for the sun to rise to start its work. While you're tucked into your bed, while your mind drifts into dreams, while your body relaxes in warm water, there are forces at work, moving, planning. Watch. See, the physical world depends on cycles. Day and night, work and sleep, rise and rest. But the unseen realm, it exists in a continuous state of awareness, constant alertness, no breaks, no time off. You might sleep, but that's why you can wake up feeling like you've been in a battle, even though you didn't leave your room. That's why you can step out of the shower and feel heavier, not cleaner. Why? Because you were in a place of vulnerability, while they were in a state of activity. You see, just because you're unaware doesn't mean they're inactive. There are forces that observe cycles, not your cycles, but cycles of opportunity, emotional cycles, physical cycles, mental fatigue, and yes, even shower routine, especially when those routines happen at hours where your spirit is most unguarded. It's not about superstition, it's about strategy. The spirit realm doesn't need an open door, it only needs a pattern. Once it sees that you operate on repeat, especially in the late hours, it doesn't need to ask permission. It just waits, watches, times your next move. They don't need rest, because they feed on response. If you respond in fear, they grow. If you respond in routine, they plan. If you remain unaware, they remain undetected. That's why some atmospheres feel different late at night. You walk through the same hallway, the same room, the same house, but something shifts when the clock strikes past midnight. It's not just you, it's them. This is why strange noises happen. Sudden temperature drops. That odd feeling that something is present when no one is there. That shadow you thought you saw. That whisper you couldn't explain. That cold chill in the steam of your hot shower. They're not figments of imagination. They are movements in motion, invisible to the naked eye but deeply felt by the aware. And when you choose to engage in physical acts, like bathing during their peak activity, you're not just exposed physically, you're broadcasting spiritually. You think the room is empty. No, the spirit realm never sleeps. It waits, it watches, it surrounds. And while you believe you're just washing off the day, they're marking your patterns, noting your hour, and preparing for the next. So what happens when that exposure goes beyond observation? What happens when you're in the wrong place, at the wrong hour, and they decide to make a move? Let's talk about bathing in the wrong battle zone. There are places meant for peace, and there are places designed for war. But what happens when you turn a battlefield into a bathroom? See, not every place is neutral. Some areas are spiritually contested. And when you step into that space at the wrong time, doing what feels normal, you don't realize you're bathing in a war zone. The water may be hot, the room may be silent, but in the spirit, that hour is loud. You're standing in the very zone where spirits roam, territories shift, and assignments are released. And if you're unaware, you become a target, not because of what you've done, but because of where and when you've placed yourself. You're vulnerable, unclothed, exposed, relaxed. That's not just water hitting your back. That's the moment the enemy waits for, the moment when your senses are dull, your defenses are down, and your routine becomes a ritual of unawareness. And if the space you're in hasn't been claimed, hasn't been guarded, hasn't been maintained with spiritual discernment, then any presence can enter, any force can observe. That shower becomes an altar, that steam becomes a veil, that silence becomes a gate. You may not see it, but some of you have felt it. That strange heaviness when you shower at night, that sudden fear that creeps in, though there's no reason. That moment where the hairs on your arms stand up, but the room is still. It's not your mind playing tricks, it's your spirit trying to warn you, because you're not just in a bathroom, you're standing in a zone that's been occupied. And the moment you step in unaware, they don't retreat, they respond. That's why people have nightmares after showering late. That's why strange dreams begin. That's why you feel watched, because you are. When you shower in a battle zone, you don't just clean the body, you step into the line of fire. They see your openness as access. They see your routine as invitation. They see your silence as surrender. The physical may seem harmless, but spiritually, you've entered their turf at their hour, under their watch. And trust me, they don't play fair, they don't need your permission. They only need your presence, in the wrong place at the wrong time. So the next time you feel that nudge, that hesitation before stepping into a late night shower, that's not fear, that's wisdom. Because when you bathe in a battle zone, you don't leave refreshed, you leave drained. But how do they even know you're there? What gives them the right to watch, to study, to track your every move? Let's explore what happens when windows of vulnerability become wide open. Invitations. You ever wonder why certain moments feel heavier than others? Why sometimes you feel completely fine, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, something shifts? It's because in the spiritual realm, vulnerability creates visibility. There are windows, moments in time, where your guard is down and your spirit is open. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your focus is internal, not external. Your awareness is turned inward, and that's when they take notice. Now picture this. It's past midnight. The world is quiet. You're alone in the shower. The water drowns out every sound. The lights are dim. The air is warm. Your eyes are closed. It's your most private moment. But spiritually, that moment is the most exposed window of your day. You're vulnerable emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And those who operate in darkness, they look for windows. They study patterns. They don't need to break in. They just wait for you to open the blinds yourself. And guess what? Late night showers, they're a wide open window. You think it's privacy, but in the unseen world it's a spotlight. Because when you turn off distractions, turn down your guard and let routine lead the way, that's when your vulnerability sends a signal. Not with words, but with energy. And energy is all they need. You don't have to speak for them to listen. You don't have to invite for them to enter. All you have to do is remain unaware, and the window stays open. That's why some of you feel watched. That's why your thoughts shift when you step into that shower, because your body is there, but so is your energy. And your energy carries a frequency, and that frequency tells them everything they need to know. It tells them you're present, but unguarded. It tells them you're exposed, but unaware. It tells them you're open. And they interpret that openness as permission. You ever walk out of the bathroom late at night and feel like something followed you? Ever hear a whisper, but convince yourself it was just the pipes? Ever feel like someone was watching, even though no one's home? That's not paranoia. That's your spirit picking up what your mind can't explain. And once they've found the window, they'll keep coming back. Because windows, once open, don't just let light in, they let things out. Your peace, your clarity, your strength. And now you're wondering, how do I close that window? How do I regain control over who sees me, who senses me, who studies me? Well, here's the truth. You can't close what you don't know is open. But how do they see so clearly? Let's talk about what happens when your stillness becomes a spotlight, and they begin to watch. Stillness can be deceptive. To the natural eye, stillness feels safe, peaceful, calm. But in the spirit realm, stillness isn't silence, it's signal. You think you're alone, but stillness is when they look closer. Because when there's no movement in the physical, activity in the spiritual becomes clearer, louder, more intense. And in that stillness, when your thoughts are soft, your body is relaxed, and your defenses are down, that's when the watchers come. They're not loud, they don't disturb the air, because they don't need to. They observe, they calculate, They monitor, and when your life becomes predictable, especially at night, they don't have to wonder when to appear. They just will. And the moment you move into that familiar routine, that quiet shower, that soft silence, you step into the perfect condition for spiritual surveillance. It's not your eyes they need, it's your energy, because stillness is the clearest lens. No distractions, no noise, no clutter. In the physical, you see peace. In the spiritual, they see a portal. That's why you feel watched, even though no one's there. That's why you pause mid-shower, feeling something just entered the room. That's why your spirit senses movement, but your mind can't explain it, because stillness sharpens their vision. When you're still, the frequency is clean, uninterrupted, no static. They can hear your thoughts, your emotions, your fears, more clearly than ever. It's not about the act, it's about the atmosphere you create around the act. And when you pair stillness with routine, especially in late hours, you create what they crave most: access without resistance. You think you're in control, you're not. You think no one's watching, you're, because they don't need permission to look, only a moment of stillness to see everything. And while you're in the shower, lost in thought, vulnerable in spirit, naked in body, you are wide open. You may not feel afraid, but you feel observed. And that's not coincidence, it's confirmation, because stillness doesn't hide you, it highlights you. And once they've seen you, they start to plan. They don't just observe, they begin to whisper. They begin to suggest thoughts that aren't yours, emotions that feel strange, dreams that don't belong to you, all from a single moment of stillness that you thought was peace, but was actually penetration. So the question is, if stillness is when they see you best, what happens when they start to influence you? What happens when the act of cleaning your body becomes the moment they contaminate your soul? Let's talk about how you clean the body, but they target the soul. You clean the body, but they target the soul. While you're scrubbing away the dust, the dirt, the sweat of the day, something else is taking place. Something you can't see, but you can feel. Because they're not after your skin, they're after your essence. It's easy to believe that what happens in the physical is the full story. That if you wash your hands, your face, your body, then you're renewed. But that's surface work. The deeper realm, that's where the real transaction happens. In those quiet moments, under the water, with your mind drifting and your guard down, that's when the attack is launched. Not on your flesh, but on your frequency. And how do they do it? Not with weapons, with whispers, thoughts that suddenly appear, ideas that seem out of place, emotions that don't feel like they came from within. You think it's just stress. You think it's just fatigue. No, it's infiltration, because they don't need to fight you physically when they can pollute you spiritually. That sudden fear that creeps in, that feeling of shame or confusion that comes without reason, that anger that bubbles up from nowhere. It's not just mood, it's manipulation. You didn't just step into a shower, you stepped into a space of exchange. You gave access through routine, and now they're leaving fingerprints on your mind. Why? Because the soul is where your choices are made. If they can influence the soul, they can shift your direction. If they can pollute the soul, they can distract your purpose. And it doesn't take a dramatic event. It only takes repetition, repeated exposure, repeated stillness, repeated vulnerability. That's why some people feel drained after they've cleaned their bodies. That's why negative thoughts seem louder after those late night showers, because they weren't cleansing moments. They were contamination moments. And the most dangerous contamination is the kind you can't see, the kind that feels normal, the kind that wears the mask of peace, the kind that looks like self-care but smells like spiritual sabotage. So now you're asking, what do I do? How do I cleanse my soul the way I cleanse my skin? How do I protect what they can't touch, but still try to influence? And here's the key. If your body needs water, your soul needs awareness. Because they can only manipulate what you won't monitor. They can only occupy what you don't observe. But it gets deeper. What happens when the routine becomes a ritual? Not just a habit, but a portal they count on. Let's talk about what happens when your night habits become spiritual patterns. It starts as a habit, but becomes a ritual. Every night, same time, you move the same way, You think it's just routine, but in the spirit realm, repetition becomes invitation. Why? Because the unseen realm doesn't respond to what you say, it responds to what you do consistently. That late night shower, that moment of stillness, that predictable hour, it becomes a spiritual pattern, a pattern you didn't know you were creating. But they've been watching it the whole time. You think it's just a way to relax, but they see it as a scheduled access point. And every time you do it without awareness, every time you step into that steam without discernment, you're confirming the appointment. You're not just bathing your body, you're participating in a cycle. And the more you repeat it, the more power it gains. Not for you, but for them. They don't need candles. They don't need chants. They only need consistency. Because spiritual forces don't break in, they wait for patterns. And when your habits become predictable, they don't see it as self-care, they see it as permission. You ever wonder why you feel the same heaviness at the same hour? Why your thoughts spiral right after the same routine? Why sleep escapes you after you relax? It's because that act, though harmless to the body, is activating something in the spirit. A loop, a ritual, a portal that opens at the same time, and they never miss it. You're not just on schedule, they are too. And when you do it without resistance, without awareness, you're not interrupting their plans, you're fueling them. This is why you can't shake certain feelings, why emotional baggage returns even after a peaceful shower, because the ritual isn't cleansing you, it's binding you. You've trained your spirit to be vulnerable at the same hour, in the same way, under the same conditions. And guess what? They know your routine better than you do, because while you're trying to unwind, they're gearing up to engage. And every drop of water that touches your body is a reminder to them you're right on schedule. The question is, are you? Are you aware of what your habits are doing in the atmosphere around you? Are you just following a pattern that feels good but opens portals you never meant to open? Because the moment a habit becomes a ritual, and the ritual becomes consistent, the influence deepens. You're not just predictable, you're programmable. So now the question if they've been watching and your habits have become rituals, what happens when your identity begins to shift without you even knowing? Let's talk about how the soul begins to mirror the hour, and the darkness starts to shape your reflection. You ever look in the mirror and not recognize who's looking back? Not because your face has changed, but because your presence feels different. That's not age, that's not tiredness, that's influence. When the darkness watches you long enough, it starts to shape you. Not all at once, not with chaos, but slowly, subtly, through alignment. Your soul begins to shift, not because you've made big mistakes, but because you've allowed small compromises over and over again. And it's not always something you feel immediately. Sometimes you only notice it when your peace fades, when your dreams get darker, when your thoughts start sounding less like you and more like something else entirely. Because when you engage in repeated vulnerable moments, especially at spiritually active hours, you don't just open doors, you start to reflect the very energy you've allowed in. You think it's just a midnight shower, but the hour has a temperature. That time of night, it carries a weight. There's a reason certain thoughts come at night. There's a reason certain temptations feel stronger after dark, because the atmosphere isn't just quiet, it's alive. And if you keep stepping into that stillness without intention, you start absorbing more than you realize. The heaviness you feel, the detachment, the fog in your thoughts. It's not always depression. Sometimes it's spiritual residue, left behind by what's been watching you, influencing you, studying you. You start speaking differently. You start reacting different. You feel irritated, anxious, low, and can't trace where it started. But if you look closely, it began when your identity was exposed, and the atmosphere answered back. Because your soul is a mirror, it reflects what it's been around. And when you bathe your body but neglect your spirit, your reflection becomes distorted. That's why certain thoughts seem foreign. That's why peace feels temporary. That's why you look in the mirror and something feels off. You're not just seeing you're seeing layers, layers shaped by energy, by time, by exposure to unseen forces. And here's what makes it more dangerous. You get used to it. You start calling the shift growth. You start calling the heaviness normal. You start adjusting your behavior to match the reflection instead of checking the source. But let me ask you, what if what's shaping you doesn't belong to you? What if the image you've become isn't who you were created to be? but who they've been subtly building you into. And if that's true, then the next question is even heavier. If your soul is now mirroring the darkness of the hour, what happens when you sleep? What happens when they follow you into your dream? When night falls, the body rests, but the mind doesn't always find peace. Have you ever woken from a dream, heart pounding, confused, unsettled, wondering what just invaded your sleep? That's not coincidence. When you unknowingly open doors during your late night rituals, when you expose your spirit during those vulnerable hours, what follows you doesn't stay in the shadows. They invade your dreams. They send messages disguised as nightmares. They plant seeds of doubt, fear, and confusion. Your dreams become battlegrounds, where the unseen forces play with your emotions, trying to weaken your resolve, erode your confidence, and steal your rest. And why do they do this? Because the soul needs rest to be strong. Without rest, your mind grows weary, your spirit becomes fragile, your purpose gets blurred. These attacks on your dreams are not random. They are targeted. They come at the moments you should be renewing your strength. And when the morning comes, you carry the residue of that battle with you: fatigue, anxiety, a cloud over your clarity. But here's the truth: your dreams are not powerless. They are a reflection of what you allow in your life. If you let the darkness watch your every move while you shower, if you give space to fear and distraction at night, your dreams will echo that chaos. But if you take control, if you guard those hours with awareness and discipline, you reclaim your nights, you push back the watchers, you protect your soul, you take back the peace that belongs to you. Because the battle isn't just about what happens in the day, it's about what follows you when the lights go out. So tonight, when you step into that shower, remember, this is more than hygiene. It's a moment of decision, a moment of power. Will you allow the watchers to see you, to influence you, to steal your rest? Or will you rise, aware and intentional, to protect what no one else can see? The choice is yours. Guard your time, guard your spirit, and know this: when you take control of your night, you take control of your life.